much money. You know where my paycheck went. I put it on to you, baby, and I never spent one red cent. Is there any way for me to carry on? Do you think I want my love on gone? Said I love you more than you'll ever know, more than you'll ever know. I'm not trying to be it, just any kind of man, no I ain't. I'm just trying to be somebody, yeah, you can love, trust and understand. I know that I can be part of you that no one else can see. Yeah. I gotta hear you say, I got to hear you say that it's alright. I'm only flesh and blood, but I can be anything you demand. I can be king of everything, or just one tiny grain or sing. Is there any way for me to carry on? Do you think I want my love on gold? Said I love you more than you ever know. I said
Given it was on.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Let me go. Let me call session.
The decimator scalar 1 not working.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining our virtual press briefing at Statin's Facebook page and the Jamaica Information Services website. Today, our Director General, Ms. Carol Coy, will be highlighting key aspects of Jamaica's economic performance during the second quarter of 2021. In keeping with the advanced release calendar, Ms. Coy will also release the September 2021 Consumer Price Index, the June 2021 International Merchandise Trade Statistics, and the July 2021 Labor Force Indicators. Ms. Coy will also present the main indicators for 2020 on a new product, the Export and Import Price Indices. Following Ms. Coy's report, we will take your questions and comments. For the question and answer session, Ms. Coy will be supported by our Deputy Director General, Ms. Leisha Delati-Budir, and Dr. Natalie Simpson, the Director of Surveys Division. Without further delay, I will now hand over to Ms. Coy.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining today's virtual press conference, where, as was mentioned before, we will highlight aspects of Jamaica's economic performance for the period July to September 2021. This will include an overview of the second quarter gross domestic product and the June International Merchandise Trade Statistics. We will also release the Consumer Price Index for September and the results of the July 2021 labor force. In addition, Statin has developed a new product, the Export-Import Price Indices, and the main indicators for 2021 will be released today. Starting with the gross domestic product. Total value added for the Jamaican economy grew by 14.2% for the second quarter of 2021 when compared to the similar quarter of 2020. There were increases in both the services and the goods producing industries of 14.8% and 12.7% respectively. For this quarter, the performance of the economy should be viewed in the context of the 18.4% decline in economic activity, which took place during the second quarter of 2020, due in part to the measures implemented to control the spread of the novel coronavirus COVID-19. During the quarter under review, there was a relaxation of some of the COVID-19 measures previously implemented by government. Such measures included a reduction in curfew hours and easing of travel restrictions, which positively impacted commerce and tourism-related activities. Other factors, such as favorable weather conditions and the flood relief program implemented by government to assist farmers, also played a part in this quarter's performance. These had a positive impact on the agriculture, forestry, and fishing industry. Looking at the performance of the services industries, hotels and restaurants increased by 334.6%. The wholesale and retail trade, repairs, installation of machinery and equipment went up by 19.3%. Transport, storage, and communication increased by 13.9%. Other services increased by 23.2%. Real estate, renting, and business activities increased by 5.2%. Finance and insurance services 2.8%. Electricity and water supplies 4%. And producers of government services 0.4%. Looking at the goods producing industries, value added for the goods producing industries grew by 12.7%, and this was mainly attributed to higher output levels in construction, which grew by 17.4%, agriculture, forestry, and fishing, which went up by 15%, manufacture went up by 12.9%. However, the mining industry declined by 9.2%, due mainly to a fall in the production of alumina and crude bauxite. Turning now to Jamaica's international merchandise trade for the period January to June 2021. Jamaica's total spending on imports and earnings from exports for the period January to June 2021 increased relative to the corresponding period in 2020. Imports were valued at $2.7 billion US dollars, an increase of 15.2% when compared to January 2020. This increase was largely attributable to higher imports of fuel and lubricants, which went up by 46.1%, and raw materials that went up by 18.8%. Earnings from exports for the first half of the year increased by 28.3% relative to the same period in 2020. This was largely due to an increase in the value of exports from the manufacture and mining and quarrying industries, which rose by 25 and 9.7% respectively. Despite the increase in both imports and exports in 2021 when compared to 2020, there was a decline in goods traded relative to the pre-pandemic periods of 2019 and 2018, influenced by contractions in local and global economies. With the onset of the global spread of COVID-19 in 2020, measures were implemented to restrict movement to limit the spread of the virus. These included closure of borders and factories globally, which led to lower production levels and lower demand for some products. As a result, the value of trade declined significantly in 2020, and despite increasing in 2021, the value of imports and exports have not yet returned to their pre-pandemic levels. The value of imports for 2020-21 was 17.9% lower than in 2019 and 7.9% less than that in 2018. Earnings from exports was 14.6% and 16.1% below that in 2019 and 2018. I will now move to the new product that we are releasing at Statin, the export and import price. The export and import price indices measure the quarterly price changes of Jamaica's exports and imports. This special report for 2018 to 2020 will be released shortly. And moving forward, Statin will be releasing the XMPI, as it's called, on a quarterly basis. In executing our mandate of producing and delivering quality statistics, Statin recognizes that while it is important to produce our regular statistical products in a timely manner, we also need to ensure that we meet the growing needs of our stakeholders as best as possible. This requires the development of new statistical products geared to satisfying changing user needs and reflecting the structural changes in the Jamaican economy. The development of the XMPI is one such product. For the 2020 calendar year, the average export prices fell by 10.3% when compared to average price of exports in 2019. This was due to the 14.6% decline in the export index of the mining and quarrying industry, impacted by the reduction in the price of alumina. Average import prices for 2020 also fell by 4.4% when compared to 2019, due mainly to the decline in the import price of fuels and lubricants, and this reflected the fall in global oil prices. The average import price for other categories, however, rose. The import price for consumer goods went up by 10.5%, while that for intermediate goods or raw materials rose by 2.7%. We will now turn to the September Consumer Price Index, or the CPI. And I need to emphasize here that the CPI measures changes in the general level of prices of consumer goods and services purchased by private households. The index, and I need to emphasize, the index does not reflect changes in individual consumer tastes and preferences, or if there's a change in your standard of living or income. The inflation rate for September 2021 was 2.3%, and this was due mainly to the 3% upward movement in the index for the heaviest weighted division, food and non-alcoholic beverages. This is the largest increase recorded for this division since the new CPI basket was introduced in April 2020. The increase in the index for food and non-alcoholic beverages was due mainly to a 3.1% index for the group food. And here you have the class vegetable, tubers, plantains, cooking bananas, and pulses increasing by 9.9%. This increase resulted from higher prices for some agricultural produce, such as tomato, cabbage, carrot, and sweet pepper. Other notable increases in the food group were fruits and nuts, which went up by 4.3%, meat and other slaughtered animals, which went up by 0.9%, fish and seafoods increasing by 0.9%, oils and fats also up by 0.9%, and cereal products increasing by 0.6%. Also contributing to the overall inflation was the 8.1% increase in the index for the division transport. and this was due to the 15% increase in bus, route taxi, and hackney carriage fares granted by the government. This movement was, however, tempered by lower petrol prices. The division housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels increased by 0.8%, due mainly to increased electricity, water, and sewage rates. The education division also moved up by 2.4% due to a rise in tuition fees at the start of the new school year, 2021 to 2022. The point-to-point inflation, which is September 2021 compared to September 2020, was 8.2%, and this was influenced by point-to-point inflation rates for the other divisions: food and non-alcoholic beverages 10.2%, transport 13%, housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels 6.6%. We will now look at the labor force, the July 2021 labor force. And as is normal, Statin conducts the labor force survey on a quarterly basis, and this is to measure the number of persons employed, unemployed, and outside of the labor force. A critical point to note is that Statin does not measure the number of jobs created. And so we are highlighting the findings of the July 2021 labor force survey. First, looking at the employed labor force. And just to point out that persons are considered employed if they are engaged in economic activities for at least 1 hour during the reference week. For the July 2021 survey, the reference week was June 2020 to 26, 2021. Based on the findings of the labor force, it is estimated that 1.2 million persons were in the employed labor force. This was 93,400 more, or 8.3% more, when compared to July 2020. The number of employed males increased by 55,700, or 9%, while employed females increased by 37,700, or 7.5%, when compared to July in 2020. In looking at the labor force by industry group, the combined increase in the number of persons employed in the industry groups, construction and real estate and other business services, accounted for over 50% of the increase in the employed labor force. There were 118,300 persons employed in the construction industry, and this is an increase of 28.3%. Of the 26,100 persons more in construction, males accounted for 25,900 of these persons. For the real estate and other business services industry, there were 115,100 persons employed, an increase of 23%. Females accounted for the largest increase in this industry, 11,900, or 25.4%. The other industry groups with notable increases were the accommodation and food service activities, which employed 17,800 persons more, agriculture, forestry, and fishing, 6,200 more persons, and the wholesale and retail repair of motor vehicles and motorcycle group, which employed 5,500 more persons. Looking at the labor force by occupation group, the group's elementary occupation and service workers and shop and market sales workers accounted for more than 50% of the increase in the employed labor force. The number of persons employed in elementary occupation was 155,700, an increase of 19.3% relative to July 2020. The group service workers and shop and market sales workers increased by 9.9% in July 2021. Other occupation groups with large increases were clerks, which went up by 18,300 persons, professionals, senior officials, and technicians, which increased by 10,400, and craft and related trade workers, which went up by 2,900. Turning to unemployment, the July 2021 labor force showed that there were 112,500 unemployed persons in Jamaica. This was a decline of 30.4%, or 49,200 persons, when compared to July 2020. The number of unemployed males fell by 43.4% in comparison to the number of unemployed females, which went down by 17.5%. Looking at the unemployment rate, the data show that while there have been some improvements in unemployment for the July 2021 quarter, the unemployment rate is still higher than that in July 2019. A review of the unemployment rates for the July quarters from 2017 to 2021 show a decline in unemployment rate for males and females from July 2017 to July 2019. The unemployment rate, however, moved up to 11.3% in July 2017, from 11.3% in July 2017 to move down, to 7.8% in July 2019. The unemployment rate for both sexes, however, increased to 12.6% in 2020. For 2021, we are seeing the unemployment rate at 8.5%, and this is 4.1 percentage points lower than July 2020. This decrease was driven mainly by the decline in male unemployment rates. The unemployment rate for males was 6.3%, while that for females was 11.1%. Youth unemployment rate, and here we're talking about the age between the ages of 14 to 24, was 23.9%, and this is 6.4 percentage points lower than in July 2020, when it was 30.3%. In July 2021, the unemployment rate for male youth was 18.4%, and for females, the rate was 30.8%. In looking at the size of the labor force, this increased by 3.4%, or 44,200 persons. Compared to 2020, the male labor force increased by 2.9%, and the female labor force by 4%. Looking at outside the labor force, we found that there were 5.2% fewer persons outside the labor force than in the 2020 corresponding period. These individuals are neither employed or unemployed. Males outside the labor force declined by 8%, while females declined by 4.6%. In closing, I will take this opportunity to recognize the work of the management and staff of the Institute. We extend gratitude to our respondents who continue to take time out of their busy schedules to participate in our household and business surveys. We also thank the ministries, departments, and agencies for making administrative records available for the compilation of statistics. We assure the public that all information provided to Statin is kept in the strictest confidence and is used for statistical purposes only. As such, we reiterate the need for continuous participation in our surveys, as it is through our surveys that the Institute makes data available for informed decision making. While data collection has been impacted negatively by measures introduced to limit the spread of the virus, Statin continues to provide information to the people and government of Jamaica to enable effective planning and decision making. The safety of our staff and mitigating the risk of COVID-19 spread to our respondents remain a priority of the Institute, and as such, we continue to collect the required data while observing the established protocols. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coy. We will now take your questions. Please use the raised icon feature if you have a question or comment. And when you are identified, please state your name and the name of the organization you are representing. All right, so we have a question from Stephen. Stephen, you may identify your organization and go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we are. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi. I left morning. I left a message in the chat, the question. Basically, I was trying to get a reminder as to how you track the employed labor force. Is it by payroll stubs or is it via a questionnaire or a survey that results in starting knowing that the labor force is 1.2 million? Just that, can you just remind us?
No problem. Our Deputy Director General, Ms. Leisha de Latibodier, will take that question.
Thank you, Stephen. We actually conduct a household survey every quarter of about 10,500 households, and we collect data from the households directly on their employment status. We couldn't use the route of a pay stub because not all persons are employed formally. And at Statin, we do not discriminate against persons who are not formally employed. So once you're engaged in any form of economic activity during the reference week, then you're considered, for at least an hour, then you're considered to be employed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. de Latibodier. Mr. Douglas McIntosh of JIS wants to know what jobs constitute elementary occupations. We'll ask Dr. Simpson to go ahead with that question.
Thank you very much. So can you hear me?
Yes, we are.
All right. So elementary occupations include cleaners and helpers, agriculture, forestry, and fishing laborers, laborers in mining, construction, manufacturing, and transport, food preparation assistants, street and related sales and service workers. So for example, persons distributing flyer, newspaper vendors, car accessories, and phone accessory vendors. This is just a summary of what is included. A full list of the occupations that would be included here is on our website and can be found in the Jamaica Standard Occupation Classification 2015 under the tab Methodology. So if you want to just see a little bit more of what is included there, feel free to peruse that document.
Thank you, Dr. Simpson. Prisnell Warren wants to know, good morning, can Statin confirm that the overall increases to inflation is cost push related, in brackets external, and if yes, is this expected to temper in the short term? So the person wants to know if we can confirm if overall increases to inflation is cost push related, external, and if yes, is this expected to temper in the short term? All right, Ms. Coy will take that question.
Okay, thank you for that question. When we do the inflation at Statin, what we track is the price of all goods, whether it's, we do not discriminate between whether it is imported or whether it's local. So that is not the that's not the main that's not the reason for doing this consumer price index. What we are actually just measuring is how our prices moved, not the reason behind the movement in the prices. That is the basis for the consumer price index, and that is what it is done worldwide. If you want to do that, it would have to be some research that some body or some agency of government would have to undertake, looking at other factors.
Thank you, Ms. Coy. Ms. Kalila Reynolds would like to know, to what extent has the issue of global supply chain disruptions coupled with rising inflation affected some of the heavily weighted goods in the basket. My apologies about the name. It's Keela Ray Miles from the Jamaica Observer.
All right. Thank you, Keela Ray. So we continue to monitor the issues related to imports and exports from our external trade statistics. However, in terms of as Ms. Coy said earlier, we are simply measuring in the CPI what the current prices of goods and services are in relation to the market. So we actually do not, for the purposes of the CPI, go behind the numbers to survey distributors to ask what is the reason for the changes in the prices. We're just simply measuring for the purposes of the CPI whether or not the prices have moved and what the current prices are. As Ms. Coy indicated earlier, we would have to do something more specific and more targeted in order to get a better sense. And we cannot speculate as to whether or not it is the global supply chain. What we have seen, though, is that from the trade side, we're seeing where the imports of consumer goods have gone down, and that was one of the estimates that we released today. So we encourage you to look at the trade statistics if you want to see how imports have been moving since the start of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Delatibodier. Are there any more questions? Kamaria Burrell, does the new export price index include a tourism price index? All right, Mr. Delatibodier will come again.
Thanks for your question. So the export and import price indices relate to the trade in goods only. So Statin currently produces trade statistics for the trade in goods only. We do not do trade in services. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, Ms. Natoya Harriot, what was the month-over-month CPI increase for September? Mr. Delatibodier.
Thank you again, Sasha. So for September, the month-on-month CPI inflation is 2.3%. We encourage you to peruse our website. The full publication in terms of the CPI bulletin is available on our website under the publication section. So for September over August, the inflation rate is 2.3%.
Thank you. Karina A., your hand is raised. You may go ahead.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I am Karen Anderson Reed from the Bank of Jamaica. And my question relates to the outturn for GDP for the June 2021 quarter. So Ms. Coy mentioned, as we would have seen also in the report, that mining and quarrying fell during the quarter. There was a decline, I believe, of about 9.2%. So from these estimates, it would suggest that quarrying fell. Now, also, we're seeing a huge increase in construction, which uses these aggregates from quarrying. So, I mean, I'm requesting an explanation, some further explanation on that.
Thank you so much for that question. Ms. Coy will respond.
Okay, the industry is mining and quarrying. Bauxite and alumina accounts for over 90% of that industry. The quarrying segment actually increased, but because of the weight of bauxite and alumina, it is going to move, influence how that industry moves. So reason for the fall is the fall in bauxite and alumina.
Thank you, Ms. Coy. Stephen, you may go ahead with your question.
All right. Hi again. The growth in the quarter was 14%, which is lower by my recollection, lower than the 18% recorded by in preliminary estimates by agencies such as the PIOJ. In Statin's opinion, is the outlook for the upcoming quarter likely to be below the projections, the official projections by other state agencies for the rest of the year? So again, the estimates versus the actual, so the actual is quite a bit lower than the estimate. And I'm just wondering if Statin thinks that the outlook is going to be similar, especially within the context of things like the Jamaica fire and what have you.
Thank you so much for that question, Stephen. Ms. Coy will respond.
Stephen, just to point out the first thing, Statin does not forecast. Statin's estimates are actually based on what actually happens in the field. So until we do our surveys and we collect the data, we do not give an opinion on what is to come. So for us, it's based on figures, and that is how Statin does its GDP. It's based on the United Nations system of national accounts, and actually we actually have to use data, either administrative or from surveys, and so we would not give an opinion on what would happen in the future because we can't.
Thank you, Ms. Coy. Javon Keys from TVJ. Are there any plans for a targeted survey looking at work in the digital economy and its contribution to GDP? Ms. Delatibodier will take that question.
Hi, Javon. Thank you for that question. At this point in time, we do not have any plans to undertake any such data collection activity. We do understand the importance of analyzing this particular segment of the economy, but at this point in time, we do not have any plans for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Delatibodier. Are there any other questions? All right, since there are no other questions, thank you for joining us via our social media live stream on Statin's Facebook page and JIS's website and YouTube page. Okay, before I continue, I realize there is another question here. Karen, your hand is raised again. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. I will just ask my questions then on GDP.
Okay.
So I'm trying to get a better understanding of what happened, particularly in two industries in the quarter. So in terms of the construction industry, I mean, I would like to know which element of the three or which sub-industry of the three categories recorded the strongest increase, whether it was civil engineering, building construction, or building installation. And I have a question as it regards to manufacturing. With regard to the food and beverage, we know that there were increases in all categories. So I am more interested in what happened, an explanation of what happened in the beverage industry, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Ms. Coy will respond.
As you would have seen, yes, the construction industry grew by 17.4%. and it's all segments of the construction industry. The civil engineering, however, would have shown strong growth because we would mainly due to higher levels of expenditure on road works such as the South Coast Highway Improvement Project. These would have influenced it. The largest segment of the construction, however, is building construction, both residential and non-residential, and we would have seen that. If you looked at all the indicators flowing into construction, you would see significant increases in the raw material going in. With regards to manufacture, both, as it says, both segments grew. There was strong demand for, one of the things we have to bear in mind is that segments like beverages, especially alcoholic beverages, are heavily influenced, their performance, by what happens in the tourism industry, what happens in restaurants. So with the opening back of the economy and the tourism industry, we see growth in that. Then these you would have had spillover into areas such as beverages. So that is what would have influenced significantly growth in the beverage industry.
Thank you, Ms. Coy. There's also another question here from Stephen. Why is male employment recovery faster than female employment? Is it construction? Dr. Simpson will take that question.
That is correct, Stephen. So like Ms. Coy said earlier, construction, real estate, and other business services accounted for over 50% of the increase in the employed labor force. And of the number of increases in construction, which is approximately 26,000 persons, males accounted for 25,900 of that. So majority of the gains in construction was, the increase, based on the increase for males in that industry. Other increases, real estate and other business services, as well as accommodation and food services.
Thank you,
Just to give a little bit more information.
Thank you, Dr. Simpson. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you again for joining us via our social media live stream on Statin's Facebook page and JIS's website and YouTube page. We encourage everyone to visit our social media pages at StatinJA to review the data presented this morning. We're also encouraging you to visit our YouTube page, Statin Jamaica, for a rerun of the presser. Remember to follow us on all our social media platforms at StatinJA on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn for regular updates on all our products and services. You are also welcome to call our library at 876-630-1600 and or email us at info@statinja.gov.jm if you have any queries relating to the data presented earlier. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our next press briefing. Have a good day.